And today, many, if not most of the poskim understand that for the good of the Jewish people, we need to convert these kinds of people. We need to create Jewish families. So what's the advantage of conversion? The advantage of conversion is that we're creating Jewish families that would be intermarriages without conversion. Now we're creating Jewish families, and it's our job to be able to create, to make Gerim who are committed to Judaism, and to make sure that the family unit that they're creating will be committed to Judaism.
Right. So even though this is according with halacha, it does seem that it's different than previous generations. Is that a correct statement? And
that is absolutely a correct statement.
And so what happened?
That's a good question. So if you look at the history of Giur, during the Roman period, or during the Greek and then Roman period, first of all, you have the Jews. We know the story of Hanukkah. During Hanukkah, the Jews, the Maccabees, were victorious, and they took over the control of of Israel, of Judea, from the Greeks. The period following that was a period of tremendous Jewish strength. And actually, they went around and they converted. The Jews went around and they converted people during that period. The Gemara talks about people who were converted during that period. During the Roman period, we also have a little bit of conversion. But around the year 400 or so, Christianity became the dominant religion. And Christianity obviously did not allow for conversion. And Jews, at least the Ashkenazi Jews, the Sephardi Jews was different. They were under Islam. Islam did not allow for conversion either. But let's focus on our Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews. They lived until the year 1800. They lived in Christian communities which prohibited conversion of non-Jews to Judaism. Bottom line, conversion was prohibited. So we have almost no conversion during this period. You never say never, because it's never, never. But mostly we don't have conversion during this period. It's very odd kinds of cases where you have conversion. The first time, sorry. You have a question?
I'm just curious of why. I understand why did it stop when the Christians came in power?
Because the Christians, they would not allow Christians to convert to Judaism. They wanted Jews to convert to Christianity. So they said it was a crime for Jews to convert anyone to Judaism. Around the year 1800 in Western Europe, Germany, France, England, Hungary, Jews became citizens. And what was created is something that the historian Jacob Katz calls a neutral society. Once Jews became citizens, or after the Enlightenment, you didn't need to be religious anymore. You could be like we are in America. What are we? We're Americans, right? I mean, nobody wants to know. What do? You go, you ask for, you apply for a job. What are you? Don't say, I'm Jewish. I'm American, right? And therefore I can apply for a job. That's what they call neutral society. The minute you have neutral society, you can live as a Jew within the other society. So Jews and Christians and all other religions could all live together. And what that did was, especially in cities in Germany in the mid 1800s, it led to a lot of intermarriage, something that you never had before, right? Up to then, Jews married Jews and Christians married Christians. But now that there was a neutral society, so Jews and Christians could meet one another. They met in university, they met in the opera, they met in work, and then all of a sudden there was intermarriage. And that led to very complicated situations. You had a Jewish man who married a non-Jewish woman, and they have children. But the man's Jewish. The man grew up Orthodox. He wants his kids to be bar mitzvah. Can you convert the children so that they can be bar mitzvah, even though the mother's not Jewish and she's not going to convert? That's a really hard question. So the Rabbanim at the time, Rav David Tzvi Hoffman was one of the great Rabbanim at the end of the 1800s in Germany, in Berlin. He deals with these questions, and some of the Rabbanim allowed it, and some of the Rabbanim didn't allow it. Are you allowed to give a bris milah to the son of a non-Jewish woman? Because the father wants to give a bris milah to his son, even though the child's not Jewish, because maybe later the child will convert. Are you allowed to give a bris milah? There was a huge debate among the Rabbanim in the 1860s whether you're allowed to give a bris milah to that child. So all of a sudden, questions of conversions came up, and they were dealt with. When the Jews came to America, starting in 1881, but from 1881 to 1924, 2.5 million Jews came to America. Most of those Jews came Orthodox, means when they came, they were Orthodox. But Jews, they met Americans, they intermarried, all these different kinds of situations. And the Rabbanim were faced with these kinds of questions. Conversion, can you convert a partner? Can you convert the children? And we have the tshuvas. That's an amazing thing. There's just a new book that came out called Masores Hagiyur that was written by Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, who's a rabbi in Israel. But he had a whole team of people who collected the tshuvos. And we have tshuvos from America from 120 years ago that deal with these kinds of questions. Can you convert these women who are non-Jewish women who are married to Jews in order to create a Jewish family? And interestingly enough, even though the tradition had been not to convert, and the tradition had been, I'll get to this in a second, the Gemara's tradition, and again, by the time of the Gemara, conversion was not really being done. The Gemara has a line. The Gemara in Yevamah says, Kashe Gerim li Yisrael kesapachas. That Gerim are difficult for the Jewish people kesapachas, like a scab. And there's a machlokes between Rashi and the Tosas Yeshanim, what it means, Kashim Gerim li Yisrael kesapachas. Rashi says it means you can't trust Gerim. What does it mean you can't trust Gerim? You can't trust Gerim because they're like a scab. They stick to their old ways, to their non-Jewish ways, like a scab sticks to the wound. And therefore you should never convert people because they're not going to be good Jews because they're like a sapachas. Tosas Yeshanim has a different shot. He says, Kasha Gerim li Yisrael kesapachas. When people convert to Judaism, they connect to their new Judaism. They connect to their new Judaism like a scab connects to the wound. And they're so connected to Judaism that actually it looks bad for the Jews. The people who were born Jewish, they're not as frum as the Gerim. So that's interesting. Two completely different explanations about, whether are we afraid of converts because they're not frum enough, or are we actually, afraid of converts because they make us look bad?
Could it be that it's not a machlokas? It's just they're talking at different times.
Different times, different situations. Are you right? It's a machlokas how to understand the Gemara. Whether or not it's a machlokas about whether or not to accept converts, that's a good question. The Gemara seems to think that you should push conversion candidates away. Right? Make sure they want it. Push them away. Make sure they come back 3 times. And, teach them the kalos, mixas, hamuros, some of the difficult laws, some of the easy laws, right? You don't have to start with the fact that you have to, that you have to fast on Tisha B'Av, right? That you don't have to eat meat during the 9 days, the hard things, right? You can start with the easy things. You get to celebrate. You have a Purim Suda, right? So, you have to choose which things you want to focus on. But there's no question that the tradition was not to accept converts. And again, I'm pointing out the tradition was not to accept converts. But anyway, the law where the Jews lived was they weren't allowed to accept converts. So when Rashi wrote his pshat, when Tosas Yeshanim wrote their pshat, so they were living in the 1100s, the 1200s in Germany and France, conversion was also. So conversion was prohibited by the Christian authorities. And so therefore they were talking about a Gemara. They weren't talking about what was really going on within their community.